The Intergalactic Combat Academy hung suspended in the void between three star systems, a colossal station of gleaming metal and translucent force fields that rotated slowly against the backdrop of distant nebulae. Within its halls, the finest military minds from 87 species converged, their collective might representing the backbone of galactic defense. Yet for all its grandeur, the Academy harbored the same prejudices that plague the wider galaxy. Cadet Lena Reyes stood at attention in the observation deck, her slight frame dwarfed by the Valari engineer beside her, whose crystalline appendages clicked rhythmically against the floor. Through the viewport, she watched the morning shift change as vessel from a dozen worlds docked and departed in choreographed precision. Her dark eyes reflected the starlight, but her expression remained carefully neutral as Commander Elira Markov's voice echoed through the chamber. Selection for the Apex Challenge has been completed, the commander announced, her augmented vocal cords lending an electronic edge to her words. The algorithm has chosen representatives from each species based on combat efficiency metrics, psychological profiles, and strategic aptitude. A ripple of anticipation passed through the assembled cadets. The Apex Challenge occurred once every solar cycle, pitting the chosen champions against general threats of the Apex species. For 7 consecutive years, no challenger had lasted more than 3 minutes against him. Most fell within seconds. The Zephyrian representative will be Cadet Vortex 9, Markov continued, eliciting approving clicks from the insectoid contingent. The Crystalline Union selects Facet Prima, the Aquatic Coalition. She paused, her brow furrowing slightly, has chosen Tidecaller Morvek. Each announcement drew reactions ranging from confident nods to nervous whispers. The more experienced species had faced threats before and knew what awaited their champions. Others, newer to the galactic stage, maintained hopeful ignorance. And finally, Markov said, her voice catching almost imperceptibly, representing Earth, Cadet Lena Reyes. The observation deck fell silent. Then, like a dam breaking, laughter erupted from multiple species simultaneously. The Goran cadets pounded their massive fists against their chests in amusement. The ethereal Fantari flickered between dimensions as their equivalent of chuckles rippled through subspace. Even the usually stoic mechanoids emitted what could only be described as electronic snickers. Lena remained perfectly still, her breathing steady, her gaze fixed on the viewport. She had learned early in her academy career that reactions only fed the mockery. Better to be a stone against which their derision could break and scatter. This must be an error, growled Vorik, a senior Goran whose scarred hide spoke of countless battles. The human? She can barely lift a standard combat rifle. Perhaps the algorithm has developed a sense of humor, suggested a Fantari, its translucent form solidifying just long enough to deliver the barb. Commander Markov raised her hand for silence, though her own expression betrayed concern. The algorithm's decision is final. All selected cadets will report to Training Bay 7 at 0800 tomorrow for preliminary briefings. As the assembly dispersed, Lena felt the weight of countless gazes upon her. Some held pity, others amusement, and a few something darker, anticipation of witnessing what they assumed would be a swift and brutal defeat. She turned to leave, only to find her path blocked by a figure whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the station lights. Cadet Reyes, Vix of the Valari, stepped forward, her compound eyes reflecting Lena's image in 1,000 facets. A moment, if you please. Lena nodded, following the taller being to a quieter corner of the deck. Vix was known throughout the academy as a mathematical prodigy, capable of calculating probability matrices that baffled even the station's quantum computers. I have run the calculations, Vix said without preamble. Your survival probability against general threats stands at 0.0003%. That high, Lena replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. I'm flattered. Vix's antennae twitched, the Valari equivalent of surprise. You jest in the face of near certain death. Would you prefer I cry? Scream? Begged the algorithm to reconsider. Lena shook her head. The decision is made. I'll face it as best I can. Fascinating. Vix's head tilted, studying Lena with newfound interest. Your species' capacity for, what do you call it? Gallows humor? It defies logical parameters. We're full of surprises, Lena said, starting to move past the insectoid mathematician. Wait. Vix's claw caught her sleeve gently. Those calculations I mentioned, they assume standard combat parameters. But you are not standard. Are you, Cadet Reyes? Lena met the Valaris. Multifaceted gaze. None of us are standard, Vix. That's why we're here. As she walked away, Lena didn't see Vix pull out her personal computation device and begin entering new variables into her probability matrices. Nor did she witness the slight uptick in her survival odds as the Valari factored in something the algorithm hadn't considered: the human propensity for defying mathematical certainty. The human quarters occupied the least desirable section of the academy, closest to the reactor core, furthest from the recreational facilities, with viewports that faced the empty void rather than the spectacular stellar phenomena visible from other sections. It was here that Lena found herself summoned to an emergency meeting with Earth's senior military staff. This is a disaster. General Morrison paced the length of the conference room, his gray hair slightly disheveled. Humanity's reputation in the galaxy is already hanging by a thread. When Threx crushes you, and he will crush you, it will confirm every bias, every prejudice they hold against us. Perhaps we can file an appeal, suggested Colonel Park, her fingers dancing across a holographic legal document. Cite algorithmic error. Request a substitution. The algorithm doesn't make errors, Dr. Sarah Vega interrupted from her position by the wall. As the Academy's only human xenobiologist, she understood better than most how the selection process worked. It evaluates based on criteria we might not fully comprehend. Criteria that have sentenced one of our cadets to death. Morrison shot back. Or worse, humiliation that will echo through diplomatic channels for decades. Lena sat quietly through the debate, her hands folded in her lap. She had expected this reaction. Earth's position in the galactic hierarchy was precarious, built more on diplomatic maneuvering than military might. Humanity lacked the natural armor of the Goran, the energy manipulation abilities of the Fantari, or the hive mind coordination of the Zephyrians. What they had was adaptability, creativity, and a stubborn refusal to accept their designated place at the bottom of the food chain. What does Cadet Reyes have to say about this? Dr. Vega asked, causing all eyes to turn to Lena. I accept the challenge, Lena said simply. Morrison stopped pacing. You accept? Do you understand what you're accepting? Threx has killed 17 challengers over the years. The lucky ones merely suffered career-ending injuries. I understand, sir. Do you? The general leaned across the table, his face flushed. This isn't just about you, Cadet. This is about our entire species standing in the galaxy. When you fall, if I fall, Lena corrected quietly. The room went silent. Morrison straightened slowly, studying her with a mixture of frustration and something that might have been respect. You have a plan, Dr. Vega observed, her scientific mind catching nuances others missed. I have research to conduct, Lena replied. With your permission, sir, I'd like to be excused. The archives close in an hour. Morrison waved dismissively. Go. Do whatever it is you think will help. But Cadet Reyes? Lena paused at the door. Don't die pointlessly. If you must lose, lose with dignity. I'll do my best, sir. The archives occupied an entire section of the Academy, its vast digital repositories containing the combined military knowledge of nearly 100 civilizations. Most cadets visited only when required for assignments. The deeper sections, housing historical documents and obscure tactical analyses, saw even less traffic. It was here that Lena had spent countless hours since her arrival at the Academy, much to the amusement of her fellow humans who prefer the combat simulators or recreational facilities. Tonight, she had the ancient warfare section entirely to herself. The lights dimmed automatically to preserve power, leaving her illuminated only by the soft glow of holographic displays. Her fingers moved rapidly across the interface, calling up files that hadn't been accessed in decades, some in centuries. Gravitational combat analysis, pre-spaceflight era, she murmured, scrolling through dense technical data. Extinct species combat methodologies. Zenith Empire, fallen 2,847 years ago. Comparable physiology to modern Apex. The hours blended together as she dove deeper into forgotten military history. Most species, upon achieving spaceflight and energy weapons, abandoned their studies of primitive combat. Why learn about pressure points and anatomical weaknesses when you could vaporize an enemy from orbit? But Lena had always been drawn to these abandoned disciplines, finding patterns and insights that others overlooked. Curious reading material. Lena didn't startle at the voice. She had sensed the presence moments before, a subtle displacement of air, a barely perceptible change in the room's electromagnetic field. She turned to find Threx himself standing. In the archway, his massive frame seeming to absorb the minimal light. The Apex General was everything his reputation suggested and more. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, his body was a perfect fusion of organic evolution and deliberate augmentation. Scales harder than any manufactured armor covered muscle groups that defied conventional anatomy. His eyes, vertical slits of burning gold, focused on her with predatory intensity. General Threx, Lena acknowledged, closing her current file with deliberate calm. I wasn't aware you visited the archives. I don't typically. He moved into the room with surprising grace for his size. But when I learned my next opponent was here rather than the combat simulators, my curiosity was piqued. Lena gestured to the displays around her. Knowledge is its own form of preparation. Is it? Threx examined one of her open files, an analysis of extinct predator species from a world consumed by its own sun millions of years ago. Your fellow humans are wagering on how many seconds you'll last. The optimists say 30. The realists say 10. And you? A rumble that might have been laughter emerged from Threx's chest. I say it depends on whether you run or fight. Runners sometimes manage a full minute. Lena nodded thoughtfully. I appreciate the insight. Threx moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from his body, a byproduct of the extreme metabolism that made his species so formidable. You don't fear me. Fear clouds judgment, Lena replied. I respect you. There's a difference. Interesting. He leaned against a nearby console, which groaned under his weight. Most challengers seek me out before a match. They boast, threaten, attempt to intimidate. You sit here, reading about dead civilizations. Every civilization dies eventually, Lena observed. The question is what we learn from their passing. For a long moment, Threx studied her in silence. Then he straightened, his massive form casting her in shadow. Tomorrow, little human, we'll see what your books have taught you. He left as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Lena alone with her research. She returned to her files, calling up one last document, one she had discovered buried in the deepest, most encrypted section of the archives. It was written in a language that predated modern Apex by millennia, requiring 3 translation algorithms to decipher. As she read, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Every civilization dies eventually, she repeated softly. But their secrets sometimes survive. The night passed quickly. By the time the station's artificial dawn began to brighten the corridors, Lena had compiled everything she needed into a single mental framework. She returned to her quarters, showered, and donned her formal combat uniform, a simple gray outfit that looked almost austere compared to the elaborate armor and ceremonial gear of other species. As she made her way to Training Base 7, she noticed the unusual crowds. Word had spread throughout the academy about the human challenger, and beings who normally showed no interest in the Apex Challenge lined the corridors. Some watched with sympathy, others with morbid curiosity. A few, she noticed with interest, observed her with calculation in their eyes. The briefing room was already full when she arrived. Her fellow challengers stood in a loose semicircle, each preparing in their own way. Vortex 9 of the Zephyrians vibrated at a frequency that made the air shimmer. Facet Prima's crystalline form had shifted to a deep battle red. Tidecaller Morvek floated in a portable aquatic environment, bioluminescent patterns pulsing across its translucent skin. "Ah, the human arrives," rumbled Gorak 12, this cycle's Goran representative. "I was beginning to think you'd fled." "Traffic was heavy," Lena replied mildly, taking her place in the circle. Commander Makov entered, followed by a procession of senior officers from various species. Their expressions ranged from professional neutrality to barely concealed concern as they regarded the assembled challengers. The rules of the Apex Challenge remain unchanged. Makov began without preamble. Single combat, no weapons beyond natural abilities, and standard protective gear. Victory is achieved through submission, incapacitation, or termination. The match ends when one combatant can no longer continue. She paused, her gaze lingering on Lena. "Any questions?" "What happens if someone defeats Threx?" Lena asked. The room fell silent. Even the perpetual humming of Vortex 9 ceased. Makov blinked, clearly unprepared for the question. "In 736 matches across 7 years," she said slowly, "that scenario has never occurred. But theoretically, Makov emphasized the word, the victor would claim the title of Apex Champion and all associated privileges. They would also fundamentally alter the balance of power within the Academy structure." She shook her head slightly. "But we're speaking of impossibilities. General Threx has never been seriously challenged, let alone defeated." "Understood," Lena said. "Thank you for clarifying." As the briefing continued, covering medical protocols and arena specifications, Lena became aware of a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. Vix had entered quietly, taking a position near the back. The Valari's compound eyes fixed on Lena with an intensity that suggested recent recalculations. Others had noticed too, several officers exchanging glances and whispered communications. When the briefing concluded, challengers began filing out to prepare for their matches. The challenge would span the entire day, with each species representative facing Threx in order of their evolutionary seniority. As the youngest spacefaring race, humanity would go last. Cadet Reyes. Vix intercepted her at the door. A moment. They stepped aside as others passed. Vix's antennae were in constant motion, betraying an unusual level of agitation for the typically composed mathematician. "I've been running scenarios all night," Vix said without preamble, incorporating variables I initially dismissed as irrelevant. "Your survival probability has increased." "To what?" 0.09%. Vix paused. "Your victory probability is incalculable." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Incalculable meaning 0? Incalculable meaning the parameters exceed my computational matrix. It's happened only twice before in my career." The Valari leaned closer, voice dropping. "What did you find in the archives?" "History," Lena replied. "Amazing what people forget over time." Before Vix could probe further, a commotion erupted from the viewing gallery. The first match was about to begin. Lena and Vix joined the stream of beings flowing toward the main arena, where thousands had already gathered to witness the day's carnage. The arena itself was a marvel of engineering, a sphere of pure energy fields that could simulate any environment, from hard vacuum to crushing ocean depths. Today it was set to neutral parameters, standard gravity, breathable atmosphere for all species, and a simple durasteel floor marked with concentric circles. Threx stood at the center, his scales gleaming like polished obsidian. Across from him, Vortex 9 buzzed in rapid patterns, its compound body separating and reforming in an attempt at intimidation. The Zephyrian's wings beat so fast they created small sonic booms, a display that would have terrified most opponents. Threx looked bored. The match began with a chime that resonated through multiple frequencies. Vortex 9 struck first, dividing into a dozen smaller forms that attacked from every angle simultaneously. It was a tactic that had overwhelmed countless opponents, the sheer sensory overload making coordinated defense impossible. Threx didn't even move his feet. His arms became blurs, each strike precisely calculated to intercept a diving form. Within seconds, Zephyrian bodies littered the arena floor, their wings crumpled, their compound eyes dim. The swarm attempted to regroup, but Threx was already moving, his massive frame displaying impossible speed as he gathered the scattered forms and slammed them together with crushing force. Vortex 9 reformed into a single entity just long enough to emit a high-pitched shriek of submission. Medics rushed in as Threx stepped back, not even breathing heavily. 15 seconds, someone whispered near Lena, slower than usual. The pattern repeated throughout the morning. Facet Prima attempted to blind Threx with refracted light beams, while striking with diamond heart appendages. Threx shattered 3 of its crystalline limbs before the crystalline union representative yielded. Tidecaller Morvek tried to use localized gravity manipulation, creating pockets of intense pressure around Threx's joints. The Apex General simply powered through, his augmented physiology adapting in real time before driving Morvek into the arena floor with enough force to crack its protective shell. By midday, 11 challengers had fallen. The longest match had lasted 93 seconds. A Phantari who used dimensional phasing to avoid direct contact until Threx predicted its emergence pattern and knocked it unconscious with a single precisely timed strike. The shortest was 4 seconds, a young mechanoid whose force fields collapsed under Threx's first punch. During the lunch interval, Lena sat alone in the human section of the viewing gallery. Her fellow cadets maintained a respectful distance, unsure how to interact with someone they expected to die within the hour. She ate methodically, her eyes fixed on the arena as maintenance crews repaired the damage from the morning's battles. Quite a show, isn't it? Dr. Vega settled beside her, offering a container of water. How are you holding up? I'm fine, Lena replied, accepting the drink. Thank you for asking. You know, there's no shame in withdrawing. The algorithm selected you, but participation remains voluntary. Lena turned to study the older woman. You were military before joining the Academy's Science Division, weren't you? 15 years, Special Operations. Vega's expression grew distant. Fought in the border wars before the peace accords. Then you understand why I can't withdraw. Vega was quiet for a long moment. I saw your research queries last night. The archive system flags certain types of searches. You were looking into ancient Apex history, pre-augmentation era, among other things. Find anything interesting? Lena smiled slightly. Did you know the Apex weren't always the apex predators of their world? They were actually middle-tier herbivores until a massive climate shift forced rapid adaptation. Their entire evolutionary path changed in less than 1,000 years. Fascinating, Vega murmured. And relevant to today because beings who transform that dramatically often carry traces of their original nature. Vestigial traits, dormant characteristics. Sometimes even weaknesses. Vega finished. Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them. The old military reports, Vega said quietly, from first contact with the Apex. There were incidents, anomalies that were classified and buried. Neural disruption events that couldn't be explained by the weapons of that era. Pressure points, Lena confirmed, at the base of their cranial column. A remnant from when they needed to rapidly shut down higher functions to conserve energy during their herbivore phase. It's been bred out, engineered away, forgotten. But the neural pathways still exist. Vega leaned back, expression thoughtful. How sure are you? Sure enough to bet my life on it. Around them, the gallery began to fill again. The afternoon matches were about to begin. Vega stood, placing a hand on Lena's shoulder. For what it's worth, she said, I've adjusted your life insurance beneficiaries as requested. Your family will be provided for. I appreciate that, Lena replied, but I don't plan on them collecting. The afternoon proceeded much like the morning. 3 more challengers fell in rapid succession, none lasting more than a minute. The crowd's energy had shifted from bloodthirsty excitement to something approaching pity as each new combatant entered the arena. Threx, for his part, seemed to be growing impatient. His victories came quicker, his strikes more decisive, as if he were eager to conclude the day's obligations. Finally, as the artificial sun began its descent toward the horizon, the announcer's voice echoed through the arena. Final match of the Apex Challenge. Representing humanity, Cadet Lena Reyes. The walk from the gallery to the arena floor seemed endless. Lena was acutely aware of the thousands of eyes tracking her movement, the whispered predictions of her impending doom. She entered through the challenger's gate, the energy field sealing behind her with a soft hum. Threx waited at the center, his golden eyes fixed on her approach. Up close, without the barrier of distance or holographic displays, his presence was overwhelming. The arena's environmental controls struggled to dissipate the heat radiating from his body. His scales seemed to absorb light, creating an aura of darkness that defied the bright illumination. "The little scholar," he rumbled as she stopped at the designated mark. "Have your books prepared you for this moment?" "We'll find out," Lena replied, her voice steady despite the hammering of her heart. She didn't adopt a combat stance. Instead, she stood naturally, arms loose at her sides, weight evenly distributed. To the observers, it looked like resignation. Even Threx tilted his head slightly, perhaps wondering if she planned to submit without fighting. The starting chime resonated through the arena. Threx moved first, as everyone expected. His charge was not the lightning-fast assault he'd used on other opponents, but almost casual advance, perhaps intending to make the match more sporting. His right arm drew back for what would likely be a knockout blow, merciful by his standards. Lena didn't retreat. She stepped forward. In the space of a heartbeat, several things happened simultaneously. Threx's fist descended in an arc that would have crushed a boulder. Lena's body flowed like water, not dodging but redirecting, using his momentum against him. Her hand shot up, fingers extended in a precise configuration she had practiced 1,000 times in the privacy of her quarters. She struck a point exactly 17 centimeters below the base of his skull, where ancient neural pathways lay dormant beneath layers of scales and augmented tissue. The reaction was immediate and absolute. Threx's entire body convulsed as forgotten synapses fired in patterns that hadn't been activated in millions of years. His legs buckled, his arms spasmed, and his massive frame crashed to the arena floor with enough force to crack the durasteel. The arena fell silent. Not the expectant quiet of anticipation, but the absolute stillness of disbelief. Thousands of beings from dozens of species stared at the impossible scene before them. General Threx, champion of champions, apex predator of the galaxy's most feared warrior race, lying motionless at the feet of a human cadet. The timer on the arena display read 9.4 seconds. Lena stepped back, allowing medical teams to rush forward. Threx wasn't dead. She could see his chest rising and falling, but his nervous system would need several minutes to reset from the overload she had triggered. She had calibrated the strike precisely, informed by countless hours of study and calculation. Victory, humanity, the automated system announced, its synthesized voice cutting through the shocked silence. New Apex champion, Cadet Lena Reyes. The words seemed to break whatever spell held the crowd. Chaos erupted in the galleries. Some species roared in outrage. Others chittered in excitement. The Goran pounded their chests in salute to an unexpected warrior. The Fantari flickered rapidly between dimensions, their equivalent of stunned applause. A few beings simply sat in silence, processing the fundamental shift in their understanding of galactic power dynamics. Threx stirred as the medics worked, his golden eyes focusing gradually on Lena. She knelt beside him, close enough to speak without the entire arena hearing. "The Zenith Empire," she said quietly. "They fought your ancestors before your species achieved augmentation. Their records survived in the deepest archives. They knew about the neural vulnerability. They just never had warriors fast enough to exploit it." Threx's mandibles moved, forming words with effort. "How did you?" Move so quickly. I didn't move quickly, Lena replied. I moved efficiently. Your species relies on overwhelming force and speed. But combat is about timing, angles, precision. Things humans have studied for millennia because we had no other choice. A sound emerged from Threx's throat, rough, grating, but unmistakably laughter. Beaten by a scholar. The irony is delicious. Medical staff lifted him onto a gravitic stretcher, but he raised one massive hand to stop them. With tremendous effort, he pushed himself to a sitting position, then slowly, painfully, to his feet. The crowd fell silent again as he faced Lena. I, General Threx of the Apex Dominion, acknowledged defeat in formal combat. As witnessed by all present, I named Cadet Lena Reyes of Earth as rightful victor and new Apex champion. He extended his hand, a gesture borrowed from human custom. Lena took it without hesitation, her small fingers disappearing in his grip. This changes everything, he said, loud enough now for others to hear. Your species, we have misjudged you greatly. Not misjudged, Lena corrected. Underestimated. There's a difference. In the days that followed, the Academy underwent transformations both subtle and profound. The rigid hierarchy that had placed humans at the bottom began to dissolve, replaced by a more nuanced understanding of strength and capability. Other species approached human cadets with newfound respect, seeking to understand the training methods and philosophical approaches that had produced such an unexpected champion. Lena herself became something of an enigma. She declined most interview requests, avoided the celebrations thrown in her honor, and could most often be found in the archives, continuing her studies. The title of Apex Champion came with privileges, access to restricted training facilities, priority scheduling, a seat on the Strategic Council. But she exercised these rights sparingly, preferring to maintain her routine as much as possible. A week after the challenge, she found Threx in the Rehabilitation Center, working to retrain neural pathways disrupted by her strike. He looked up as she entered, his expression unreadable. Come to study your defeated foe, he asked. Come to check on a respected opponent, she corrected, pulling up a chair beside his training station. How's the recovery? Humbling. My body must relearn what it once did instinctively. The healers say full recovery will take months. He paused, studying her. You could have killed me. Yes. Why didn't you? Lena considered the question. Because victory isn't about destroying your opponent. It's about changing the game itself. Your death would have created martyrdom, revenge cycles, deeper divisions. Your survival and acknowledgement do more for human standing than any amount of force could achieve. Wisdom beyond your years, Threx mused, and beyond your species' reputation. Reputations are built on incomplete information, Lena said. That's what my research taught me. Every species, every civilization has hidden depths, forgotten strengths. We just had to remember ours. Over the following months, the effects of Lena's victory rippled throughout the Academy and beyond. Human applications to advanced military programs increased by 400%. Trade negotiations that had stalled for years suddenly found resolution as other species reconsidered their assessments of Earth's potential. Most significantly, the rigid caste system that had unofficially governed Academy social structure began to break down. Lena regularly found herself training alongside beings who would have previously ignored her existence. Goran warriors sought her advice on pressure point techniques. Valari mathematicians collaborated with human strategists to develop new combat algorithms. Even the aloof Fantari began participating in cross-species training exercises. 3 months after the challenge, Vix approached her in the archives with a datapad clutched in her chitinous grip. I've completed my analysis, the Valari announced without preamble. Of what? Of you. Of the match. Of the statistical impossibility that occurred. Vix's compound eyes glittered. Do you know what the probability of a human defeating Threx was when I first calculated it? 0.03%, you said. That was the revised figure. The original was 0.0001%. Effectively impossible. Yet you achieved it. Vix set down the datapad. I've isolated the variable I failed to account for, which was desperation innovation. Your species' entire evolutionary history is built on finding solutions to impossible problems. Trapped on a single planet with limited resources, surrounded by predators, lacking natural weapons or defenses, by all rights, humanity should have gone extinct millions of years ago. Instead, you became the dominant species of your world through pure cognitive adaptation. Lena smiled slightly. We're good at thinking our way out of corners. More than that, you're good at turning weaknesses into strengths. Physical frailty forced you to develop tools. Short lifespans drove rapid innovation. Individual vulnerability created social cooperation. Every limitation became a catalyst for growth. And now the galaxy must reconsider its fundamental assumptions about power, strength, and potential. Vix's antennae drooped slightly, a sign of deep thought. Your victory wasn't just personal. It was paradigmatic. You've shown that our entire system of measuring military worth is flawed. That realization continued to spread through the academy and beyond. Traditional training methods were questioned, then revised. New courses emerged focusing on asymmetric warfare, cognitive combat theory, and adaptive strategy. The very definition of strength expanded beyond physical prowess and species-specific abilities. 6 months after the challenge, Lena stood before the Academy's Strategic Council, a body she now sat on as Apex Champion. The gathering included senior military officials from across the galaxy, their attention fixed on her presentation. The Apex Challenge revealed a critical flaw in our defense strategy. She began, activating a holographic display. We've built our entire military doctrine around the assumption that certain species are inherently superior combatants. This blinds us to both vulnerabilities and opportunities. She gestured to a tactical map showing recent conflict zones. Here, a Goran battalion was ambushed by physically inferior pirates who exploited their predictable charge patterns. Here, a Fantari special ops team failed because the enemy used low-tech solutions immune to dimensional interference. And here, the presentation continued, each example highlighting how rigid thinking about species capabilities had led to tactical failures. Her proposed solutions were radical, integrated training programs that paired traditionally weak species with strong ones, combat doctrines that emphasized adaptability over pure force, research initiatives to uncover and exploit forgotten vulnerabilities in all species, including humanity. You propose to institutionalize weakness, growled Admiral Korvax, the Goran representative. I propose to eliminate the concept of weakness entirely, Lena corrected. Every trait, every characteristic can be either advantage or vulnerability depending on context. True strength lies in understanding and adapting to that context. The debate that followed was heated but productive. By the session's end, the Council had approved pilot programs for 3 of her initiatives. It was a beginning, a crack in the rigid structure that had governed galactic military thinking for centuries. As the Council members filed out, Threx approached. His recovery was complete, his bearing once again that of a supreme warrior. But something had changed in how he carried himself. Less rigidity, more awareness. You've started something that cannot be stopped, he observed. Change was inevitable. I just provided a catalyst. A very violent catalyst, he noted dryly. I still have neural echoes from your strike. Sorry about that. No, you're not. His mandibles curved in what she had learned was an Apex smile. Nor should you be. You did what was necessary to shatter illusions. Sometimes wisdom must be beaten into thick skulls, even Apex skulls. They walked together through the academy corridors, an unlikely pair that drew curious glances from passing cadets. The hierarchical arrangement that would have once made such companionship impossible had dissolved, replaced by something more complex but ultimately stronger. What's next for the champion who wants no glory? Threx asked as they reached a junction. More research. The archives contain military histories from over 800 extinct civilizations. Each one failed for different reasons, but all have lessons to teach. Looking for more weaknesses to exploit. Looking for patterns. Every species that achieved dominance eventually fell. The apex, humanity, every current power were all temporary. But maybe by understanding why civilizations fail, we can make our temporary moment last a little longer. Threx regarded her thoughtfully. You think beyond individual combat, beyond species rivalry. That perspective, it's what allowed you to defeat me, isn't it? Partially. That and really good pressure point mapping. His laughter echoed through the corridor, drawing startled looks from a group of freshman cadets. As they parted ways, Threx to the combat simulators, Lena to the archives, she reflected on how much had changed in 6 months. Yet in many ways, she remained the same, a scholar at heart, convinced that knowledge and understanding trumped raw force. The Academy's transformation continued over the following year. The Apex Challenge itself evolved from a simple display of dominance to a complex test of adaptive combat, with challengers facing scenarios that required more than physical prowess. Threx retained his position as primary defender, but now worked alongside a rotating team of advisors, including Lena, to design tests that truly measured combat readiness. More significantly, the integration of species accelerated. Mixed unit training became standard. Strategic planning sessions included perspectives from all member races. The old assumptions about species-specific roles in combat dissolved as creative applications of diverse abilities produced unprecedented tactical innovations. 1 year after her victory, Lena found herself once again in the observation deck where it had all begun. The viewport showed the same star field, the same steady flow of vessels, but the Academy itself had changed profoundly. In the reflection of the transparisteel, she caught sight of someone approaching. "Vix," she greeted without turning. "Still calculating probabilities?" "Always, though my models require constant updating these days." The Valari joined her at the viewport. "Too many variables in flux. Isn't that better than stasis?" "More interesting, certainly." Vix's compound eyes studied her. "I have a confession. The night before your match, I placed a significant wager on your victory." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Based on your 0.09% calculation?" "Based on my observation of you in the archives. Mathematics can predict many things, but it struggles with the weight of intangibles. Determination, creativity, the willingness to risk everything on knowledge others have forgotten. You gave me too much credit, did I?" Vix gestured toward the bustling corridor visible through the deck's entrance. "Look at what one impossible victory achieved. The entire power structure of the Academy, arguably of the galaxy, shifted because a human cadet spent her nights reading about extinct civilizations instead of practicing combat forms." Lena was quiet for a moment. "It wasn't just me. It was timing, circumstances, the accumulated frustration of every species labeled inferior. I was just the catalyst. Catalysts shape reactions, even if they remain unchanged themselves." Vix's antennae twitched with amusement. "Though I notice you still spend most evenings in the archives. Old habits. Besides, there's always more to learn, and more weaknesses to uncover." Lena smiled. "More connections to understand. The archives taught me that every strength contains the seed of its own defeat, but also that every weakness holds potential for transformation. The trick is recognizing which is which." As they talked, cadets from various species passed by, no longer arranged in the rigid hierarchies that had once defined Academy life. A group of humans discussed tactical theory with Zephyrian pilots. Goran engineers collaborated with Valari mathematicians on shield modifications. The transformation Lena had catalyzed continued to ripple outward, reshaping not just military doctrine, but the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Sometimes, she mused, watching the diverse groups interact. The most profound victories are the ones nobody sees coming. The ones that change the game so completely that the old rules become irrelevant. Like defeating the undefeatable in 9.4 seconds? Like proving that undefeatable was always an illusion. We all have our neural pathways, our hidden vulnerabilities. The question is whether we acknowledge them or let pride blind us to reality. Later that evening, as Lena made her way to the archives for another night of research, she passed the memorial wall where the names of fallen champions were inscribed. For 7 years, only challengers' names had been added. Her name should have joined them, would have, if she had fought like everyone expected. Instead, she had changed the very nature of the challenge, transforming it from a display of dominance to a celebration of adaptive excellence. The memorial now included a new section, Champions of Innovation, recognizing those who advanced military science through unconventional means. Her name headed that list, but she spent little time contemplating it. The archives awaited, with their treasure trove of forgotten knowledge and untapped potential. As she settled into her usual study corral, pulling up files on pre-spaceflight combat philosophies from a dozen different worlds, she smiled at the irony. Everyone had expected the human to be crushed in seconds. Instead, she had made the apex kneel in under 10, not through superior strength or speed, but through the most human trait of all, the stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. The display before her flickered to life, showing ancient combat forms from a world whose name had been lost to time. As she began to study, making notes and connections that might someday prevent another civilization's fall, she embodied the lesson her victory had taught the galaxy. Never underestimate those who turn to books when others reach for swords. For in knowledge lies power, in understanding lies victory, and in the willingness to learn from the past lies the key to surviving the future. The Academy continued its transformation, shaped by the ripples of one impossible moment when conventional wisdom met unconventional thinking, and wisdom won. And in the quiet corners of the archives, a young woman who had changed the galaxy continued her studies, knowing that the next impossible victory might be hidden in the next forgotten file, waiting for someone curious enough to look beyond the obvious. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent to the small dramas of species and civilizations. But within the Academy's walls, the fundamental nature of strength itself had been redefined, all because a human cadet chose to fight with her mind rather than her fists, proving that sometimes the mightiest warriors are those who know which battles to fight, and more importantly, how to fight them. 10 seconds had changed everything. But the real victory lay in what came after. A galaxy slowly learning that true strength comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you can understand, adapt, and transform. And in the archives, Lena Reyes kept reading, kept learning, kept preparing for the next impossible challenge, knowing that somewhere in the accumulated wisdom of extinct civilizations lay the keys to ensuring her own species, and perhaps the entire galactic community, would not share their fate. The cycle of rise and fall, dominance and defeat, continued as it always had. But now, perhaps, with a little more wisdom, a little more understanding, and a recognition that sometimes the quietest revolution is the one that reshapes the very foundations of power itself. After all, she had entered the arena as a mere cadet, and in less than 10 seconds, she had made not just the apex, but the entire galaxy reconsider what strength truly meant. The transformation was far from complete. There would be resistance, setbacks, moments when the old ways reasserted themselves. But the seed had been planted, watered with the shock of impossible victory, and nurtured by the gradual recognition that adaptation, not domination, was the key to survival. And so the story spread, from academy to fleet, from military to civilian channels, becoming legend even as its protagonist continued her quiet work in the archives. The human who had beaten the unbeatable. The scholar who had achieved through wisdom what countless warriors had failed to accomplish through force. But those who knew her best understood the real truth. Lena Reyes hadn't just defeated General Threx. She had defeated the very concept of defeat itself, proving that with enough knowledge, preparation, and courage to act on unconventional insights, any barrier could be overcome, any giant felled, any impossible odd transformed into inevitable victory. the galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere in the vast archives of the Academy, a young woman smiled as she uncovered yet another forgotten secret, another piece of the puzzle that might one day save them all. For she had learned the greatest lesson of all, that true power lies not in strength of arm or speed of strike, but in the willingness to question what everyone else accepts as unchangeable truth. And in that questioning, in that relentless pursuit of understanding, lay the seeds of every impossible victory yet to come.